The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot, a final, brutal punctuation mark that would end his life as he knew it. He thought he was taking out the trash, rid himself of a burden. He didn't realize he had just thrown away the winning lottery ticket to the universe. 3 hours earlier, the apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic, rattling hum of the radiator that never quite worked. Isabella sat at the chipped Formica kitchen table, her hands trembling so violently that the paper she was holding rustled like dry leaves. It was a letter from a law firm in Zurich, a name she hadn't heard in 20 years. Her estranged grandfather had passed away, and in a twist of fate that felt like a clerical error, he had left everything to her, not just money, an empire, a shipping conglomerate worth billions. Isabella looked around the dingy apartment. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners like sunburned skin. The air smelled of stale grease and despair. In her arms, barely 3 weeks old, baby Noah slept, his tiny chest rising and falling against the frayed wool of her cardigan. "We're safe, Noah," she whispered, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "We can finally leave." But fear, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She wasn't thinking about leaving the apartment. She was thinking about saving her marriage. She foolishly believed that this money would fix the rot at the center of her life. Her husband, Derek. She thought the stress of poverty was what made him cruel. She thought that if she could just pour gold over the cracks in his heart, he would become a man he pretended to be when they first met. Isabella froze. The letter in her pocket felt heavy, like a stone. "You're kicking us out?" "Now, Derek, look outside. It's a blizzard." "Not my problem," he said, opening the front door wide. The wind howled into the hallway, sending a chill straight to her bones. "I paid the rent through the end of the week, but I want you gone. Now." "Derek, please," she begged, clutching Noah tighter as the baby began to stir and whimper. "I have something to tell you. We don't have to live like this. I have money." "You have nothing," he roared, grabbing her arm. His grip was bruising. "You have nothing but debt and excuses. Get out." He shoved her hard. Isabella stumbled backward, her boots slipping on the slick floor of the hallway. She barely kept her balance, curling her body around Noah to protect him. She landed on the doormat outside their unit. "Derek, you're making a mistake," she screamed, the wind snatching her voice away. "The only mistake I made was marrying you," he shouted. He grabbed the handle. He looked at her one last time, not with regret but with disgust, and slammed the door. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. Then came the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. Isabella stood in the freezing hallway, the dim fluorescent light flickering above her. She reached into her pocket and felt the crisp edge of the letter. The paper was worth billions. But standing there, shivering in the drafty corridor with a crying infant and nowhere to go, she felt poorer than she ever had in her life. She had the kingdom, but she had just been exiled to the wasteland. She turned to the stairs. She couldn't stay here. She had to move, or they would freeze. She pushed open the main building door and stepped out into the blinding white void. The cold wasn't a temperature anymore. It was a physical weight, pressing down on Isabella's shoulders, trying to crush her into the pavement. The snow came down in sheets, a white curtain that erased the world. Streetlights were mere smudges of orange haze in the distance, offering no warmth, only a reminder of how far she was from safety. She walked blindly, her boots crunching on the accumulating ice. Her body was curled around Noah like a human shield. He had stopped crying, which terrified her more than his screams. "Stay with me, Noah," she chattered, her teeth clicking together so hard it hurt. "Just a little further." The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She was walking through a lethal blizzard, homeless and destitute, while a piece of paper in her pocket declared her one of the wealthiest women in the country. She could buy this entire block. She could buy the building Derek was currently sleeping in. But right now, $1 billion couldn't buy a single degree of warmth. It couldn't stop the numbness that was creeping up her fingers, turning them into clumsy claws. She reached the edge of the highway. The shelter was 3 miles away. She knew with a sudden, terrifying clarity that she wasn't going to make it. Her legs felt like lead. The wind whipped her hair across her face, blinding her. She stumbled over a hidden curb and fell hard onto her knees. The impact jarred her, but she didn't let go of the baby. She stayed there, kneeling in the snow, the cold seeping through her jeans instantly. Is this it? She thought. Is this how the story ends? Then light. 2 beams of white cut through the darkness, blindingly bright. The roar of an engine grew louder. Then the screech of tires on ice as a vehicle swerved to avoid the dark shape on the side of the road. A massive black SUV came to a halt just feet from her. The door flew open before the engine even settled. A man stepped out. He didn't run. He moved with purposeful, terrifying speed. He was tall, wearing a heavy wool coat, his face obscured by the driving snow. "Hey!" His voice boomed, deep and commanding, cutting through the wind. "Are you crazy? You can't be out here." Isabella tried to stand, but her legs refused. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and hollow. "My son," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Please. He's cold." The man froze. He looked down and saw the bundle in her arms. The frustration on his face vanished, replaced instantly by a look of absolute horror and focus. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask why she was there. He dropped to his knees in the snow, ruining what looked like very expensive trousers, and scooped both of them up. He was warm. He smelled of cedar and rain, a scent so sharp and clean it made Isabella dizzy. "I've got you," he said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was an anchor. "I've got you." He carried her to the car, opening the passenger door and settling her into the heated leather seat. The rush of warmth from the vents hit her face like a physical blow, painful and wonderful all at once. He ran around to the driver's side and jumped in, slamming the door against the storm. The silence inside the car was deafening. He turned on the interior light. For the first time, Isabella saw him clearly. He had dark hair plastered his forehead by the wet snow, and eyes the color of steel, intense, guarded, but currently filled with concern. This was Ethan. "Is the baby breathing?" he asked, his hands hovering near Noah, but afraid to touch. Isabella pulled back the blanket. Noah let out a soft, disgruntled squeak and shifted. "He's okay," she sobbed, the adrenaline finally crashing. "He's okay." Ethan exhaled, a long breath that fogged up the window. He looked at Isabella, really looked at her, taking the bruise forming on her cheek from the zipper, the thin coat, the desperation. He didn't see a beggar. He saw a woman who had walked through hell to keep her child alive. "I'm not taking you to a shelter," he said firmly, putting the car into gear. "The roads are closing. My house is 2 miles up the ridge. You're coming with me." Isabella gripped the door handle. I can't impose. I have nothing to give you." Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing as he looked back at the dark road they had come from. "You aren't imposing," he said softly. "And tonight, you don't need to give anything. You just need to survive." As the car pulled away, leaving the frozen nightmare behind, Isabella touched her pocket. The letter was still there, but looking at the man driving to the storm to save a stranger, she realized that true value had nothing to do with the numbers on that page. Ethan's home wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of glass and stone perched on the edge of a cliff. As they stepped inside, the silence was absolute. The storm outside was reduced to a mute, cinematic swirl behind triple-pane windows. "The guest suite is down the hall," Ethan said, his voice lower now, echoing slightly in the vast, high-ceilinged foyer. "There are fresh towels. I'll find something for you to wear. I don't have women's clothes here." Isabella stood in the center of the room, dripping water onto the polished slate floor. She felt small, filthy. The luxury around her, the abstract art, the modern furniture, the sprawling space, didn't comfort her. It terrified her. It reminded her of the power dynamic she had just escaped. Men with money held the keys. Women without it were just guests waiting to be evicted. "I can't stay," she blurted out. Noah was asleep against her shoulder, finally warm. "The storm will pass in a few hours. I'll call a taxi then." Ethan stopped halfway up the stairs and turned. His jaw tightened. "You almost died 10 minutes ago. You aren't going anywhere." "I don't have money to pay you," she snapped, the defensive reflex kicking in. "I don't take charity. I don't want to owe you anything. Ethan walked back down the stairs slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. Do you think I picked you up for money? Do you think I'm looking for a payout? Why did you stop? Most people would have kept driving. I almost didn't, Ethan admitted. The confession hung in the air. I was angry. I was coming back from a meeting that didn't go well. I prefer to be alone. I don't like complications. I'm a complication, she said bitterly. Yes, you are. He looked at her, his gaze intense but unreadable. But when I saw you on your knees, you looked like you were fighting a war all by yourself. I know what that looks like. Isabella looked up. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw tired lines around his eyes. She saw a man surrounded by expensive things, but devoid of any personal warmth. No photos on the mantle, no clutter, no life. Who hurt you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan stiffened. The walls went back up instantly. That's not part of the deal. You get warm, you get safe, you leave tomorrow. We don't need to trade sad stories. The rejection stung, but it also made her feel safer. He wasn't trying to charm her. He was helping her despite his own desire for isolation. Suddenly, a loud buzzing noise shattered the quiet. It wasn't the storm. It was the intercom gate system. Ethan frowned and stood up, walking to the wall monitor. Who is buzzing at this hour in a blizzard? He pressed a button. The grainy black and white video feed flickered to life. Isabella's blood ran cold. Standing at the gate, lit by the security camera, was a figure banging furiously on the metal. Even distorted by the camera and the snow, she knew the stance. She knew the anger. It was Derek. I know she's in there. Derek's voice crackled through the speaker, distorted and tinny. I saw your car pick her up. That's my wife. That's my son. Open this gate. Isabella stood up, trembling so hard the hot chocolate sloshed over her hand, burning her skin. He found us, she whispered. He's going to take Noah. He's going to take everything. Ethan looked at the screen, then back at Isabella. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not the fear of a storm, but the fear of a monster. He says he's your husband, Ethan said calmly. He kicked us out, Isabella cried, backing away. He threw us away. Please, don't let him in. If you let him in, I'm dead. Ethan looked at the gate monitor again. Derek was now kicking the intercom post. He wants his property back, Ethan murmured. He turned to Isabella and his face changed. The guarded, lonely man vanished. The protector returned. Stay here, Ethan said, walking toward the front door. What are you going to do? Isabella gasped. I'm going to explain to your husband, Ethan said, his voice dangerously low, that he doesn't own things he threw in the trash. Isabella held her breath, listening to the muffled voices through the thick oak door. She couldn't hear the words, but she heard the tone. Derek's voice was high, frantic, a bully losing his grip. Ethan's was low, steady, indistinguishable from the rumble of the thunder outside. Then silence, the sound of an engine revving, tires spinning on gravel and fading away. The front door opened. A gust of cold air followed Ethan back inside. He locked the heavy deadbolt with a final metallic click. He didn't look like he'd been in a fight. He looked like he had just finished a business transaction. He's gone, Ethan said, brushing snow off his shoulders. I told him the police are already on their way. Men like him, they're cowards when the audience isn't on their side. Isabella exhaled, her knees giving out. She sank onto the sofa. He'll come back. He won't stop. Let him try, Ethan said, walking over to the fire. He added a log, the sparks flying up like tiny fireflies. This house has better security than the Federal Reserve. You're safe here, Isabella. He said her name for the first time. It sounded different when he said it, not like an accusation, but like an acknowledgement. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a heavy, comfortable silence. The storm outside felt distant now, a backdrop to the strange intimacy of the room. Ethan sat down closer this time. The rigid distance he had kept earlier was gone. You asked me who hurt me, Ethan said quietly, staring into the flames. Isabella turned to him. You don't have to tell me. My wife, he said, the words heavy, and my daughter, 3 years ago. A drunk driver on the I-95. I built this house for them. We never spent a single night in it. Isabella's heart broke. She looked around the beautiful, empty room and suddenly understood. The lack of photos, the cold perfection. It wasn't a style choice. It was a mausoleum. He had been living in a monument to a life he never got to live. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. She reached out, tentatively covering his hand with hers. He didn't pull away. "I thought I wanted to be alone," Ethan continued, looking at her hand. "I thought if I didn't let anyone in, I couldn't lose anything else. But when I saw you tonight, holding that baby like he was the only thing in the universe, I remembered what it felt like to care about something more than myself." Just then, a soft gurgle came from the pile of pillows. Noah was awake. Isabella moved to pick him up, but Ethan was faster. His movements were hesitant at first, but his hands were gentle. He scooped the baby up, supporting his head with natural ease that betrayed his past. Noah stared up at him with wide, dark eyes and grasped Ethan's finger. Ethan smiled. It was a small, rusty thing, but it transformed his face. The harsh lines softened. The steel in his eyes melted into warmth. "He's a fighter," Ethan murmured, rocking him slightly. "Just like his mother." Isabella watched them. The stranger who would save her life holding the son her husband had discarded. In that moment, the secret in her pocket felt irrelevant. She wasn't falling for Ethan because he was rich. She was falling for him because he was kind. And for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a paycheck, but as a woman. "Ethan," she said softly, "there's something you need to know. About why Derek was so angry." "About me?" Ethan looked up, Noah still gripping his finger. "It doesn't matter, Isabella. Whatever debt you have, whatever trouble, we'll fix it. I have resources." "It's not debt," she said, a small, nervous smile playing on her lips. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled letter. "It's actually the opposite." She handed it to him. Ethan shifted Noah to one arm and took the letter. He read it once, then twice. His eyes widened. He looked from the paper to Isabella, stunned. "Isabella," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Do you realize what this is? You own half the shipping lines in the Atlantic." "I found out 3 hours ago," she said. "Derek doesn't know. He threw us out before I could tell him." Ethan looked at the letter, then at the baby, and then at Isabella. He started to laugh. It was a rich, genuine sound that filled the empty room. He threw out a billionaire. Ethan shook his head, handing the letter back. "The irony is poetic. But Isabella, this changes everything for you. You can go anywhere. You don't need my help." Isabella stood up and walked over to him, placing her hand on his arm, right next to Noah. "I have $1 billion, she said, looking into his eyes. "But 20 minutes ago, all I had was a freezing road and a prayer. You didn't stop for the money, Ethan. You stopped for me. I can go anywhere, but I think I'd like to stay right here." Ethan looked at her, the air between them charged with a new kind of electricity. Not fear, but promise. "Then stay," he whispered. But the peace was shattered by the shrill ring of Ethan's phone on the coffee table. He picked it up, frowning at the caller ID. "It's the police," he said. He answered. "This is Ethan." "Yes. What?" Ethan's face went pale. He looked at Isabella. "He's what?" Ethan asked the officer. "Okay, I understand." He hung up, his expression grim. "What is it?" Isabella asked, clutching his arm. "Derek didn't leave," Ethan said, his voice tight. "He crashed his car at the bottom of the hill. He's in the hospital, and he's telling the police that I kidnapped you and the baby." The living room, once a sanctuary of warmth, was now bathed in the harsh, rotating blue and red lights of police cruisers parked in the driveway. Ethan opened the door. 2 officers stood there, hands resting near their holsters. "Mr. Vance, we need to speak with the woman," one officer said sternly. "Her husband claims she's being held against her will." Isabella didn't hide behind Ethan. She stepped forward, Noah resting securely on her hip. She wore Ethan's oversized sweater like armor. "I'm Isabella," she said, her voice steady. And the only person who held me against my will was the man who threw me and his newborn son into a blizzard 3 hours ago. She told them everything. She showed them the text messages Derek had sent earlier that week about dead weight. She pointed to the bruises on her arm. The officer's demeanor shifted from suspicion to sympathy. The kidnapping narrative crumbled instantly. Derek wasn't a victim. He was a man scrambling to cover up attempted manslaughter. 2 days later, the hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Derek lay in the bed, his leg in a cast, looking smaller than Isabella remembered. When she walked in, he sneered, though it lacked his usual bite. "So," he grunted, "you came crawling back. Realize your rich hero didn't want a charity case forever." Isabella stood at the foot of the bed. She placed a folder on his tray. "These are divorce papers," she said coldly. "I'm not asking for alimony. I'm not asking for child support. I just want full custody of Noah and for you to disappear from our lives." Derek laughed, a dry, hacking sound. He grabbed a pen. "Gladly. Sign me up. You think I want to pay for that kid? You're doing me a favor, Isabella. You're broke, you're homeless, and you're alone. Good luck." He scribbled his signature with aggressive strokes, practically throwing the pen back at her. "There. You're someone else's problem now." Isabella picked up the papers, checking the signature. It was done. She was free. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "You're right about one thing, Derek. I was a problem for you, but you're wrong about the rest." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photocopy of the letter from Zurich. She dropped it onto his chest. "I didn't come back to ask for money. I came to tell you that my grandfather died. I inherited the company, Derek, the shipping line, the accounts, all of it." Derek frowned, picking up the paper. As he read, the color drained from his face until he looked like the sheets he was lying on. His hands began to shake. "Billions," he choked out. This is billions." "Yes," Isabella said softly. "I was going to tell you that night. I was going to share it with you. But you threw us out before I could speak." "Isabella," Derek stammered, sitting up, ignoring the pain in his leg. "Bella, wait. We can talk about this. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. We're a family." "We were never family," she said, opening the door. "You wanted a bank account, not a wife. Well, you missed a deposit." She walked out, leaving him screaming her name in the empty room, clutching a piece of paper that detailed exactly what his cruelty had cost him 1 year later. The glass house on the cliff didn't look like a museum anymore. It was messy. There were toys scattered on the Persian rug. There were photos on the mantel, pictures of a dark-haired baby laughing, and a woman with bright eyes looking at a man who adored her. Ethan stood on the balcony, watching the sunset over the snow-covered valley. He wasn't wearing the heavy wool coat of a lonely man anymore. He was in a T-shirt, looking relaxed, younger. Isabella stepped out behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Noah, now a sturdy toddler, was wobbling around the living room, trying to chase the family dog. "You're thinking about it again," Isabella teased gently, resting her chin on his shoulder. "I'm thinking about the odds," Ethan admitted, turning to kiss her forehead. "If I had been 1 minute later, if I had taken the other road, if you hadn't stumbled." "It wasn't luck," Isabella said, looking at the ring on her finger. A simple, elegant band that meant more to her than the entire inheritance. "It was fate. We had a break so we could fit together." Isabella had used her inheritance to build shelters for women escaping domestic violence. She had turned her pain into power. But her greatest treasure wasn't the empire she ran. It was the man holding her and the boy laughing inside. Ethan pulled her close. "I love you, Isabella. I love you, too," she whispered. "My unexpected love." They stood together as the sun dipped below the horizon, no longer afraid of the cold, because they carried the fire with them. Asterisk sometimes. The worst day of your life is just a prologue to the best days. Have you ever found love or connection where you least expected it? Share your story in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more stories of hope. Thanks for watching. Asterisk.